one all the way from almost Indianapolis, right? That's great. That's great. Okay, I'm Dorothy Jerse, and I'm someone who never had writing a book on my things to do list. You hear it? That's way for these people to succeed. I have a lot of things on my things to do list, but writing a book was never one of them. I have nothing profound or earth-shaking to offer you tonight in this visual night that you see around. I'm not here to ask you for any money or to inform you about any pressing issue or persuade you to my side of politics. But I'm here to share my experience in working in this beautiful special collections department at our wonderful Vigo County Public Library. This is definitely my home away from home. First, you may want to know how I became interested in Terre Haute history. I wasn't born or raised here. I didn't arrive in California until 1964, 51 years ago. And Terre Haute opened its heart to me, and I quickly became involved with my husband and 4 children. So I'm not native, and people say, well, what do you know about it? You didn't graduate from Wiley, you didn't graduate from Garfield, you didn't graduate from Tech. I'm a convert, and as you know, the converts are the most dedicated kind of people. I became fascinated with the Vigo County Historical Museum, and I was working at the YWCA downtown, and I would take groups of young girls there for workshops. And then in 1974, I was appointed curator, and I was awash in local history. So much to learn, and so much to be excited about. And one of the projects that we did was the year of the historical photograph with my friend and museum librarian Judy Calvert, and that wonderful photographer of rotogravure fame. I'm sure many of you remember Ken Martin. He used to cover all of, I see the heads going, they used to cover all the school proms, dances. He'd often take the whole group by getting on top of a ladder. It would scare me to death. I don't know how he didn't fall down. But they would appear in the brown and white section, sometimes called the brown and white funnies. But everybody would look to that section in the Sunday paper, which of course was called the rotogravure. We were happy that the year the historic photograph was very accepted in the city. We asked residents to share their photos, and we set up displays at various public places. And it was at that time that Dr. Bill Pickett, a history professor at Rose-Hulman, was president of the Historical Society. And he had been working with Indiana University Press to have a photo history of Terre Haute published. And one day he stopped by the museum and asked me to write it. Who? I said. Yes, you, he said. Well, I was stunned. At home, I told my husband Bill about it. You know, after all, he was a college professor and he knew about such things as writing books. I didn't. And surprisingly, he said, why not? And encouraged me. So I decided I'd say yes if I could talk Judy Calvert, our librarian. She was the librarian at Schulte High School before it closed. And if she would work with me, if she had the expertise I didn't have, that I needed to learn it if I'm going to write a book. Well, lucky for me, she said yes, and off we went into the unknown world of writing a book, Judy, Ken Martin, and myself. And this was the result. It's now out of print. I wish I had 100 of them because they go on Amazon or whatever you name online for big bucks now. It's out of print. There's nothing we can do about it. That was in 1983, and I looked and accepted other opportunities as they came along. Our second book, another pictorial history, it was a much bigger project, and it was sponsored by the Historical Society and Terre Haute First National Bank. It was published 10 years later in 1993, and then 4 more local history books followed. This one was pretty much the city. This one went more into the county and back to the beginnings, where the first book was 1900 to 1950. So that was really an expanded project for us. Judy and I knew that the Martin Photo Shop had one of the best collections in the state of photographs that taken during World War II, home front photographs. And we felt we had to do a book to celebrate the 50th anniversary. My husband's a veteran from action in the European part of the war, so I've kind of lived a long time with World War II. And we felt it was very necessary that we document this some way. And as you know, you just don't go ahead and publish a book. It's not that easy. You need a sponsor. Well, I went around, I tried to interest businesses and so different people in it. I absolutely did not luck out. But finally, the Historical Society said they would underwrite the initial cost. And the result, probably, it's one of the best home front books in the state, thanks not to Judy and me, but to the Martin photographs, because his collection is just fantastic. I think these people need to sit down first here.
They're getting chairs. Thank you.
But this is the home front book, and I'm particularly proud of this. I guess I was a teenager during World War II, so it's very meaningful to me yet. Then Eston Fusen, who had the catalog agency, I didn't know him at all. He approached me at a reception once, and he wanted me to write a history of local new car dealerships. He didn't have to ask me twice. I love business history. In fact, my favorite subject at University of Illinois, I was an accounting major, was the economic history. I love to see how businesses grow, fail, make it, or whatever. It's very interesting. So the result was this. We did this book on, I lived at the library because I had to go through all the ads and that to see who were dealers from 1900 for the whole century. It was a lot of work, but yeah, I'm very proud of this. There aren't many books that have been written about the history of one kind of business or trade. And shortly after, John Becker, a postcard collector, and I co-authored Terre Haute and Vigo County and vintage postcards. And this, we did not design this. This was part of the Arcadia Press series. And he had marvelous postcard images, and I did most of the research and writing. And it was published in 2001, and it's still selling. It's one of the ones that's still available. Then, I don't know what I do with that. Then, shortly after, John Becker, a postcard collector, and I authored Terre Haute and Vigo County in vintage post. That's just what I said. Yeah, I'm back to that. That's the one we did. And then came Frank Kleps. Frank Kleps was a local, he has Kleps Aluminum, or did, and he's a local businessman and car collector, and he wanted research done on Clarence Wagner, a West Terre Hautian who traveled from the East Coast to the West Coast 3 times by bicycle in the 1920s. We had no interstates, and we didn't even have good roads at all. It was fantastic. Well, nothing had been written, and the only way I could get that was to just go through one issue of the paper after another. I had to rely on the newspapers. So that was published, and fortunately before Frank died, and he felt so good about it because he owned the bicycle that Wagner had. And I was so glad we got this done. And both Eston and Frank are deceased now, but I feel very, very fortunate that I got to work with each of them. I didn't know either of them until we got into the books. And when you work with men like that, it's just one of those wonderful things that happens sometimes to an author. If I hadn't written books, I probably would have never known or gotten to know what great people that they were. So there you have my first 6 books. And none of them would have been possible without this special collections department in the Vigo County Historical Museum archives. You know, one has to have thick skin to write local history. Space prohibits including every person who thinks he or she should be a subject in your book. And it's the same thing with events. Most books are not long enough to include every event in every organization. And sometimes there are just ones I could not include. And believe me, they are not happy campers, and they let you know it. But you do the best you can, and you have to go into it with that idea, or else you're sunk before you even begin. And I'm very well aware I've never been a professional historian. It was no secret that the academic historians did not always approve of others writing what they considered their field. They call ours public history. Unfortunately, the climate changed a little with the celebration of the nation's bicentennial in 1976 and Alex Haley's book, Spruce. All of a sudden, everybody seemed to be able to have heritage. It wasn't just the rich and famous. All of a sudden, we all came into the picture. And unfortunately, I was working at the museum there, and I loved it because I could bring the museum to the everyday person, which I think was real important. I remember a telephone call I got from a history professor after writing one of my first books, and it was a put down. Unfortunately, my husband was in the room at the same time, heard it, so I know I'm remembering it right. And several years later, the same man inscribed one of his books to me, called me a scholar. And he had noted how hard I was working, and I can't tell you how much that inscription meant to me. Okay, I made it. But now, a seventh book, that was never in my mind. I assumed I was at the end of book writing, but strange things happened, and the seventh book started with my newspaper column. After I retired from the YWCA, I began writing a weekly column for the Tribune Star called Looking Back. It began in 1992, and it's still featured each Sunday. For each week, I use a microfilm reader here in this room and go through 7 issues of the newspaper 10 years ago, 7 issues from 25 years ago, and 7 issues from 50 years ago. And so far, I figure I've gone through about 70 years of newspapers, page by page. And I love doing it. I'm not complaining. I'm completely absorbed in what I'm doing. There's so much to learn. And I think I'm going to get one of the reels. I want to show you what a little
I'll grab one for you.
But this is what we use on the microfilm readers. This particular one goes from January 1st, 1906 to March 17th, 1906. And you take it, it's all in there chronologically, easy to find, and you take it out and you put it on the microfilm reader, and you've got a whole world open to you. It's just as simple as can be. And that's what I use all the time. And the best part is the information is available to everyone at no cost, because it's in this department in our library, and so many newspapers are available this way. We are so fortunate to have this library here, and they have these resources available. The first newspaper for Terre Haute was published in 1823. They printed it in Vincennes with 200 copies sent to Terre Haute by boat on the Wabash River. And there were times we had newspapers and times we didn't. But when the Civil War started, newspaper publication became very popular. And we had papers here like the Daily and Weekly Gazette, the Terre Haute Journal, the Daily Post, the Wabash Courier, Saturday Evening Mail, and then the Saturday Spectator, some of you remember. And we also had a number of German newspapers that were printed and written here and spread out throughout the Middle West until World War I, when they were shut down. And then we had the Advocate, a labor union publication, which was excellent for many years. Now, many of these issues have been saved on microfilm, and they're in the cabinets right back there. And writing that, looking back how since 1992 led to something I could never have dreamed of. An editor at the History Press in Charleston, South Carolina, saw the column online and called the Tribune Star. And Sheila Tamir in the newsroom referred the call to me, and I was asked to consider writing a Terre Haute history under the publisher's theme, On This Day in Terre Haute History. Talk about unexpected. I mean, this phone call just came right out of the blue. He sent me 2 samples, one of Chicago and one of Columbus, Ohio, written under the same theme. And of course, I immediately fell in love with the Chicago book, my hometown, and that's my favorite city. So that convinced me completely. I got to have one like that about Terre Haute. But did I want to take on this lengthy project at age 87? My husband said the way I like challenges I couldn't refuse, because this was a challenge. I'd never written a book like this before. So, okay, take it on at 87, finish when you're 89, but it doesn't really matter, I guess not. I wondered if I could find an event for each of the 360 days, 65 days plus leap year. And I signed the contract in April 2014 and went to work. And I just skipped my other life. I didn't meet with any of my friends on our usual meetings and coffees. I just spent many hours in this department and writing late into the night. I couldn't do both. I can't do as much as I used to. I'm slower, let's face it, than when I was in my 50s. But for some months last winter, this room was being renovated and enlarged, and some of you can remember what it was like. And the microfilm readers and the film remained available in a little tiny room off the main lobby. And thanks to our library executive director, Christy Howe, she could have closed the department for the duration of the project, and this book would never have made it to publishing deadline in June, and I would have just been out of luck. So see, everything was going my way. How could I do this? I not only had to find something for each day, I wanted to keep a balance using years from the early 1800s until the present day, pretty much covering our bicentennial period. And I couldn't concentrate on a favorite decade. I couldn't just do the 40s or the 50s. The entrance needed to be balanced, I knew, between political, business, social, and sports, just like my Sunday column. The publisher also had many rules. No space for an index, and I think every history book should have an index, but when you're working for a publisher, they're the boss, and that's the way it is. Submit about 60 illustrations for the 366 days covered. Oh, I would have liked to send a lot more in than that, because I like photographs, but they have a certain format they do that sells, and that's what you have to stick to. So I learned a lot. I'd never worked directly before for a big publisher. And thank goodness for Judy Calvert's postcard collection and the Historical Society archives. And I can't say enough for Rick Orman. He has mixed pics downtown, and he did all the technical stuff for me. I didn't know what it meant by so many dots per inch and all that stuff. You know, I'm just an old woman. But he took over and did it for me, and I always appreciated it. And David Patterson at the Tourism Bureau was most encouraging. Now, they asked each story for each day to be limited to 150 words. And this is tough, because you got some stories you'd like to write on and on about, but you got to pick out what you can say in 150 words. So I decided to look for and use first drafts, and who could tell these stories better than the newspaper reporters. And I also thought these reporters and editors needed to be recognized for their good work. I'm a real newspaper fan. I love newspapers. Wherever we travel, I pick up the newspaper. And I was able to give about 3 dozen of them credit, including one sitting right over there. I got his name. The reporters based their stories on the available facts, and all history is based on the selection of available facts. So it was a good source. I don't think I could have had a better one. You know, no two individuals have the same history, but no two communities have identical histories either. Now, I've been told that if you want a successful business, the answer is location, location, location. Well, when you write a history project, you're told it's presentation, presentation, presentation. And in case of this book, the publisher prescribed presentation. I was lucky. It was all figured out for me. They'd done it before, a short story for each day of the year. But I also needed a target. For whom did I want to read this book? So I decided I wanted to attract people who may never sit down and read a profound history book or textbook, but they might be tempted to learn the history in bits and pieces, like a mosaic. And I wanted it to be a popular history, not a reference book. I had worried about being able to find a local history event for each day, but I found I would often find 2 or 3. And maybe, you know, on the same day there's an explosion or a train wreck, the same day ground is broken for an important building, the same day the governor announces that I-69 is not going to go through here. Which one did you choose? And and I agonized over some of these choices, but I finally got it down to try to choose the one which would be of interest to the most people in the community in everyday life. I felt I had to include the good and the bad. There's some sad things in this book, and I wasn't only going to do a promotion like for a community award, rather I wanted to show everyday life as it was. Mark Bennett, Tribune Star columnist, read the book and said I chronicled tragedies, heroics, and celebrations reflecting the entire community, not just the wealthy and notable. And he got it right because I tried to write it with a populist view. I guess I could say there were more coal miners that lived here than rich and famous people. And that was my philosophy. It's everyday people that make the community go. I'd like to read you just a few examples. You're such a good audience. You're so attentive. January 19th, 1907. A passenger train pulled into the Big Four station at Sanford, a Fayette Township community. As the passenger train passed two parked freight trains, one or two explosions were heard. On Monday, tragedy from the Saturday night was reported in the Terre Haute Tribune. People were struck dumb from the first breath of the terrific concussion. The darkness and the fierce wind added to the terror, and it was some time before the population awoke to a realization what had actually happened. Many reached the scene in time to hear the piteous wails of the unfortunate ones who were buried under the debris and were being slowly burned to death. After a time, the wails died away and the awful death was over. I think that reporter caught it just exactly like it was. The official count was 15 casualties. Officials of the Big Four declared there was neither nitroglycerin nor dynamite in the freight cars, and it remains an explosion mystery unsolved. Okay, do you include something that sad? Yes, you include something that sad. Because what do you pick up the paper, the front page, what's on it? The tragedies, because we're all people. Right now, this Paris thing is driving my husband nuts. Awful tragedy over there, but that we have to consider the bad, with the good. But getting to something a little bit more happy, I worked at the YWCA in Fairbanks Park for quite a few years, and I knew there had been a swimming pool there, but it was gone before we moved here. And so I found this in the August 22nd, 1924 paper. The swimming pool in Fairbanks Park was now open. The Terre Haute Tribune reported, Terre Haute is enjoying her $68,000 bathtub. The new municipal swimming pool on favorable days has an average attendance of 1,200 people. On Thursday, there were 210 automobiles parked in Fairbanks Park about the pool. The pool is enjoyed by young and old and is popularly declared to have been one of the best investments the city ever made. So I looked at the ads at the time, and at the same time, the downtown department stores advertised wool bathing suits to fill the itch at $4.95 and rubber or linen bathing shoes. Fairbanks Park, the city's own Riverside Park, was donated by the Fairbanks family in 1916. It was removed in 1966, and an arching metal sculpture, of course, as we know, was constructed near the pool in 1983. And bringing us up a little bit more to what you all remember, I like this one. Joyce Shanks wrote about the end of the Grand Theater. She wrote, this is August 6, 1960. Crashing brick and stone, tumbling down amid a mushroom cloud of dust, formed the final curtain in the history of the Grand Opera House, wrote Joyce Shanks for the Terre Haute Tribune. If these old walls could have shared their memories, how many volumes they would have filled. The Grand Opera House was built on the southeast corner of 7th and Cherry Streets. More than 1,600 patrons were at the gala grand opening on November 2nd, 1897. Fine performances with famous stars, including Sarah Bernhardt and George M. Cohan, continued to be featured until talking motion pictures became the rage in the 1930s. And the Grand Opera House became the Grand Theater. On this day, that is August 6, 1960, A crowd of spectators, including owner Anton Holman Jr., watched the demolition to make way for the Terre Haute House parking lot. The former Liberty Theater at 729 Wabash was opened as the new Grand Theater. And we still see that parking lot behind the hotel, so it's still with us. I've got one that surprised me the most, and I'll share it with you. August 18th, 1949. It was called DDT Spray Day. And you're going to be surprised if you're young, because I was surprised and I'm old. The spray day was designed to stop the spread of polio. A strange effort indeed, but fear of the disease was widespread. The DDT Spray Day was jointly sponsored by Civic Administration and the Chamber of Commerce. All places of business, with the exception of industries, closed their doors at 1 p.m. and employees joined owners and city employees in spraying to help prevent the spread of disease in the city. Sherwin-Williams Paint Company, 1143 Wabash Avenue, supplied 15,000 packages of powder and 200 cases of liquid containing DDT for painting screens and garbage pails. In addition, many people purchased DDT from other stores. Manager E.E. Tigre of the Vigo County Fair, which was to open at the new fairgrounds, this was the first year that the fair moved south, assured the public that the grounds and buildings would be sprayed daily. And I just couldn't believe this, but I do remember how scared we were of polio. We had 2 little kids then, and how little we knew about the harmful effects of DDT. But history is interesting.
What was the date of that?
August 18th, 1949.
49.
Yeah. So it was born Rachel Carson really when she got us interested in all the bad things that these insecticides did. And then, before I quit, I want to just do a word about the cover. My husband got the biggest kick out of this. The editors and I went round and round about the subjects to be pictured. I knew I had to have Max Ehrman. I'm a real Max Ehrman fan. I mean, anything he writes is important for me. And the courthouse, of course, is a must. I wanted the title to be, on this day of Terre Haute History, the city on the Wabash, because of our Wabash River initiative. They wouldn't go for that. Didn't fit into their bit, so I quit arguing about that. I knew we needed something about education, but rather than a university, how about a high school graduation class? This is state high. And what about the person? I wanted Chauncey Rose at first, because Chauncey Rose was the foundation of this town in many, many ways. That they weren't interested in seeing this old man, you know, all those pictures look like they never smiled or anything like that. And okay, we'll come up with Ralph Tucker, and he served as mayor for the longest time. He always wore a rat and black hat, and I was so fortunate when we moved here. I got active downtown, and he was at the Chamber of Commerce by then, and so we got to know him when he was a guest at our home and everything. So I feel real good about getting him on. And of course, you got to have sports. Let's just face it. As you go through the old papers, they might cut the national and the local news, but they hardly ever cut sports, do they? And so we have Bud Taylor, who was the boxer known as the Blonde Terre Haute in the 20s, and the Memorial Stadium, which I like not only because of the athletics, but the fact that it was for the veterans. And then we have Larry Bird. Now, I did not choose Larry Bird, and I got Larry Bird in here a couple times because I'm a real Larry Bird fan. When we travel anywhere, the only thing people know about Terre Haute is Larry Bird, so you better be a Larry Bird fan. But I didn't think it belonged there because he wasn't from Terre Haute. But it happened that one of the editors above the ones I worked with, there's a whole stream of editors in these publishing houses, had lived in this area, and it had to have a Larry Bird picture. So I started looking. I tried to find a good one of the statue, and I found some of the Pacers, but no, we wanted an Indiana State. So I finally told them, if you want a Larry Bird picture, that's fine. I agree with it, but you're going to have to find it. And they finally went to ISU and got it through people here. And so we have Larry Bird on the cover. And I'm in total agreement with it, but it's funny how somebody in Charleston had lived here that insisted that Larry Bird be on the cover. The picture of the ladies you won't recognize, the one right here is Madam Brown, and these are her friends. Now, we've had a lot of women prominent in local history Sally and I have done a lot of work on doing their history, but Madame Brown is probably the most popular one in the city, and I don't know what that says about our society. We like things like that. And when Mary Lee Hagan, who's director of the museum, she gets more requests for programs on Madame Brown than any other woman, and we've got some really historic women from this town. So it's on there, and then again, it hits people. It's about everyday life, I guess is what I want. But this is enough about my book. I think I've gone 3 minutes over, Allison. But what I want to emphasize tonight is you might not be a technology genius. I'm not. I can barely use that microfilm bit. I call for help sometimes. But it is easy to read the old newspapers. And if you're doing genealogy and you find the date your grandfather was born at St. Anthony Hospital, don't quit there. Get a reel like this on the day he was born. Look up and see, what was news then? What were the grocery prices? What real estate was advertised? How much did a room rent for? Who was asked in a help wanted column? Boy, that'll open your eyes, the kind of jobs that were. But I just think that you can add so much more to your family history if you know the times in which they lived or in which the birth or death occurred. And I just want to emphasize that it's so easy. I can't use any of this fancy stuff. I've never been good at it, and my kids all live far, far away. They're all good at it. Grandkids are good at it, but I'm not. And the staff here is amazing. They're always pleasant. They're always ready to help. And so I guess it's time to introduce one of you to you now, and she'll tell you about some of the other things that are available in this department that I'm too old or too stupid to use, because I've told you what I use. And Allison, if you want to come up, Allison, and she can tell you more about other things that are available.
I had a question.
This is Allison Furry. She's a graduate of South High School and Indiana State University, and is now an assistant library at Vigo County Public Library. So.
I think she had a question for you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are all these books of yours in the special collections here?
Yes, they pulled them out for me, so
they're
my
all
friend
here?
and helper back there, Leslie, didn't have to carry those either. So books are heavy.
And where are the postcard collection, the vintage Terre Haute postcards? Where are they?
That Arcadia still has that. I think the museum still has at their bookstore. They have a little gift counter, have it available.
One museum.
At 6 in Washington.
Historical Museum?
I'm sorry, here.
The Historical Museum?
Yeah, they have a little in there. As you go in there, there's a little gift shop, just a counter, but they have books, and I think that's one they still have.
No, not the book, the actual collection itself.
Oh, that belongs to my co-author, John Becker.
It's privately held.
Yeah, it's private,
Oh.
and the ones I used in this book are Judy Calvert's private collection, but the museum does have a fantastic postcard collection itself, and I guess you have some too, don't you?
Yes, we
And,
also
so they are available. I just happen to use private collection because I know people, but Any other questions before Allison? Yes.
Would you care to share your perception of how journalism styles have changed over the years?
Oh, interesting.
I think, for example, of the piteous wails that you referred to, accurate and vivid, but I don't know that it would see print today.
No, it's very different than now the way we write, but we're different. It's just different. The whole papers look different. Back in the beginning there weren't photographs, and that has made a big difference when photographs came into newspapers. And the writing, they didn't get bylines back then, unless it was an essay by somebody important in that. But like now, you get a byline when you do a story, And they're different. And the advertising now in our papers, so much of the advertising comes with inserts. And back then, it was all in the paper, and that's what made the paper so much thicker and larger, where the fact that the ads were in the paper. But the writing's changed too, and I think probably all writing, even the books written through the years, have changed, don't you? I mean, it's just the newspapers That's what's so good about using newspapers, is because they reflect the style and the life, I think, you know, as it is. I'm a real newspaper fan. I love them, so. Okay, Allison.
Does anybody have any more questions for Dorothy?
Well, I want to say something about this wonderful woman. I did not know you were writing this book and how deep, how busy you were with that. But one night this past year, I called her, or no, I emailed her at about 9 o'clock at night.
This is from Paris, Illinois.
Yeah. And they were doing a tribute over here to retirees. And how did they think about their not working, or if they were still working? And my husband was still working at 76 and loved every moment of it. But the essay, and you had to have a picture, but the essay had to be, I think it was 150 words, something like that. Well, I sat down and wrote my things about this wonderful man, and it come to like 300 words. And I had to have it, take it over there and have it over there by 9 o'clock the next morning. And here I am sitting at the computer saying, Dorothy, you've got to cut this down for me. I can't do it. And like I said, I didn't know she was this busy working on her own thing. But by 8 o'clock this morning, she had it done for me and back on the computer.
That's just being a friend.
Any more questions? I just want to make sure.
Well, did you write anything about Cherry Street? You was talking about Madam Brown.
I have,
Oh, yeah, there was a,
you probably want to hear the one I got on prostitution. Everybody. Everybody loves prostitution. You know, that's a tough, I had to be careful. I got kids reading this book. So I really didn't know how to do it, and yet I knew it had to be included.
February, that was
Valentine's Day.
That was his first year. Okay, I can't find it right now, but it's in there, and what I did was go to the oral history project that the Wabash Valley Press Club and the library did some years ago. They did an oral history project, and they interviewed one of the businessmen in town who, when he was a young boy, used to deliver papers in the area where the houses of prostitution were. And he had some remarks on how nice the people were and how splendid some of the houses were. He figured that people with money, men with money went there, and how some were very poor, and that probably attracted different trade. That's pretty much what it says, but I can't put my finger on it right now. But you read the book, you'll find it.